All right. So we're in here. I'm Shock Exchange, and I'm here with Mr. Mitchell, of course, and this is Trump and the GE. No regime change in Russia. That's sort of the topic of the day, and that's um, seemed to be a hot topic in the United States. It seemed to be a hot topic in the U.S. over the past few decades. Regime change, no matter what the question, the answer seems to be regime change always. So, as we always do, we start with the economy, and I don't think there's really much of an update since the last time we spoke. That the economy's still not that strong. It's hard to really look at the vital signs after we come out of this pandemic. Um, on a broad level, still inflation is up, and the government's trying to get a handle on that. I'm not sure they can, given the level of price gouging going on in certain markets, whether it's precious metals or food or gasoline or what have you. Biden's trying to get the oil prices down, but to no avail. Um, we cut our purchases of oil and from Russia, but apparently other countries, particularly Europe, are still buying oil from Russia, and they're buying it in rubles. I understand that Russia's now selling oil to China, and they're going to accept yuan. So either way, whether it's rubles or yuan that's being used to purchase oil, less dollars are being used. So that means there's less demand for dollars, which means the dollar is becoming de-emphasized thanks to Joe Biden. So oil is something that everybody needs, and it's a large purchase item. So that means that there's going to be a large flow of rubles or yuan around the globe, and that means there's less demand for dollars. So the dollar has become, I wouldn't say obsolete, but it's fast. It could go the way of the British pound, where it's not as important as it used to be. Um, the other thing is that the Fed is hiking interest rates to try to quell inflation. Again, I don't think they can do much about the price gouging, but they should have normalized interest rates years ago, in my opinion. So now they're normalizing rates. Um, they've committed to unwinding its $9 trillion balance sheet, selling off bonds of about $95 billion per month, which is a good thing. They should have done that years ago, and they never should have let it get to this. Some are talking about the Fed's trying to crash the market, or the Biden Fed is trying to crash the market. There's no reason for the Dow to be at 34,000 to begin with. So whether it causes the market to decline, I think it will over the long term. There may be some good news that could spur the market if the Ukraine war ends. But my guess there'll be a rotation out of a lot of tech stocks, any stocks that don't make sense, into more value oriented stocks. At least that's my hope. So even if the market declines, there could be a rotation into certain stocks that actually have revenue and earnings, and away from these sort of meme stocks, and away from these sort of tech stocks that go up simply because they're going up. So that's sort of my broad take on the economy. I think one politician suggested that they were trying to cool the housing market, which is equivalent, in my opinion, equivalent of someone stealing your keys and then trying to help you go look for them. They spiked the housing market on purpose, and they meant to help Blackstone, BlackRock, and these people who donated to the Obama administration to help them own the housing market. Now that they control it, they determine whether rent goes up or down, and it never goes down. They determine where you live or if you can afford a house or not. Now the housing is unaffordable for white folks. Now the politicians are going to do something about it. They never should have let it spike this high to begin with. So it gives the illusion that they're going to do something about it, but it's a problem they created for no reason. And not economically sound. No economist, nowhere, black, white, dead or alive, suggested that you cause housing prices to go up in perpetuity, and that's good for the economy. There's no
Yeah.
economist anywhere would have suggested that. So I guess on these Bernanke we kept talking about, there may be deflation, so we got to stop that. We got to worry about um, deflationary effects of a recession. It's supposed to be a deflation. Assets are
Right.
supposed to fall during a recession. It's like saying we got to do something about the cold weather. It's winter time. It's supposed to get colder in winter, or do something about the snow. We're going to spend tens of trillions of dollars to keep it from snowing in winter. It makes no sense. But that's sort of my take. at a broad
No,
level.
I actually am going to pick up because I think that's a perfect analogy um, that describes, this asinine monetary policy that we've been dealing with and are only now seeing repealed, that we've been talking about for how many years, and finally seeing the Fed begin to end this QE craziness that's
QE
caused.
craziness. QE
Yeah,
craziness.
exactly. That has just been it's just been out of control. And finally putting an end to it, and to even uh to even it does, it gets kind of daunting, exasperating sometimes because of the amount of things that you're watching happen in real time. You've been standing on your soapbox. You definitely feel like the soapbox preacher that pours your heart out, and nobody is listening. Nobody cares. Everybody's telling you to shut up, throwing tomatoes at you, only to realize, like, holy crap, this guy's been may have been saying a thing or two, and knowing what he's talking about, right? So yeah, sometimes it just gets a little exhausting to even think about it. To even going back to the your earlier point about, it's wintertime, it's supposed to get cold. We were talking about melt ups, melt downs, stagflation versus deflation, dot 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 dot. All of these is like, so in other words, assets are coming down to where they should have been, as opposed to the fact that you've been pumping them up for the last 14 plus years.
Right.
How many more years do you want to go without a winter and then complain that it's getting too hot because of climate change?
Mhm.
Like, when you don't allow evolution to go through its evolutionary course, and then you cannot sit there and complain about the result of the lack of the evolutionary process that should be happening because you've manipulated it to where it currently is. And that's what we're
Right.
watching in real time. Now the Fed is put out a report that it fears a housing bubble. They just put out this report within the last few weeks. And it's like, gee, you think that there may be a bit of a housing bubble? Like, where was this Fed report
Right.
when California, smack in the middle of a COVID pandemic, sold the most houses in California's history in a single month? And I believe that month was July or August, that it cracked even its own record and cracked a national record. And it had already put up a record number either the year or previous year before that. So you're talking about a few thousand homes, and most of these homes that were being sold were well over $1 million a piece. So, how is it that you're just noticing a housing bubble when the signs were all over the place? Like, how is it
Right.
that we're selling record volume of homes and for record prices in the midst of a pandemic?
Right.
We're supposed to be facing the worst economic crisis, because it wasn't just a health crisis, but it was also an economic crisis.
Right.
So while folks were, uh, their pay was largely stagnant, cut off, unemployment skyrocketed, people had to live on unemployment, had to get eviction moratoriums, rent moratoriums, mortgage moratoriums, in order to keep the economy open and somewhat afloat, but yet real estate was selling in the highest volume in history at the
Right.
highest prices in history.
Yeah, the
And
champagne's still flowing. The champagne's
is
still flowing, right?
exactly, it
The
took you
crystal,
2
the
years
crystal's still
later
flowing.
to be like, oh, wait. And if you read through the report, which was laughable in and of itself, and it's really indicative of how the Fed is really just, in my opinion, it's largely become a joke. It's not even, it's no longer a thermometer
Right. Right.
for the temperature of the country. Um, where we used to be able to look at that institution and to see a pretty um, somewhat objective outlook on what the economy is doing, how fairly well the economy should be doing, where the lending, where the buying should be in terms of market growth on a national scale. That's largely gone out of the window. It's largely become a joke because even the report itself was still kind of walking on eggshells to just call it for what it actually is and say, yes, this is a full blown housing bubble. It said in so many terms, this is a housing bubble, dot, 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 kind of. Kind of.
Well,
So it couldn't even get to just saying that it's a housing bubble, and in one breath they stated that this is not a housing bubble that is going to reflect 2007, 2008. However, that income, because largely because of income and the lending rates compared to income. So essentially debt to income ratios. The debt to income ratios when compared to 07, 08 were beyond 7%, whereas now the debt to income ratio is below 4%, which is largely true. However, so it stated that because of that, that the American borrower uh, is in a largely stronger financial position, that folks aren't taking on unnecessary risk. However, it completely ignored the fact that when we look at corporate level debt, when we look at the student loan debt, when we look at credit card debt, when we look at auto loan debt, the levels of those debts compared to 2007, 2008, and the size of wallet share, then there has to be a risk assessment, a risk adjusted assessment. So the fact that it completely ignore that we're looking at, and even comparatively, the national interest, the national debt, right? That this thing, depending on the metric you look at, it ranges somewhere between 16 trillion and about 30 trillion on the highest end. But the long and short is that you have to go through intellectual contortions to ignore the material reality, to sit there and say that, oh, well, because of this one metric, then the overall American economy is in a stronger position. Like, how stupid do you have to be to think that our economy is in a stronger position when we were already on a crash course? And then to even acknowledge the fact that the bulk of in that same report, they acknowledged that the bulk of the buying was actually not individuals, it's
right,
corporations. But
right,
then they downplayed the corporate ownership as the ones causing the bubble in that same report. That's what I say. Like
right.
this has just become a joke. Um, eh, and it just gets daunting to see these things week in, week out. Unemployment numbers were higher than expected. The rate of job reports was lower than expected. And then you have Deutsche Bank putting out another. This is really the second one. I don't know why this one has gotten significantly more attention than the one that they put out last year, which we talked about on this show. Because we talked about how odd it was for a multinational bank to essentially write the equivalent of the sky is falling. They typically are very conservative, hyper conservative, especially in their PR statements and public facing statements. And this is their second output, and it's been ironic to watch the response of both liberals and conservatives alike, accusing Deutsche Bank of money laundering and being kind of the pot calling the kettle black. And it's like, while that may be true, it doesn't make the warning that they have outlined and have been fairly consistent that the U.S. is facing one of the worst financial crises. If there isn't monumental policy change on a government level, and they're expected to hit by 2023. Well, we're smack in Q2 of 2022, and regardless if they're the biggest money launderers on the planet, it doesn't. To me, that would be a testament to the fact that what they're saying has a high degree of legitimacy um, simply because they both see the open financial system and the shadow financial system. So if they're telling you that, hey, stuff is on the horizon, then yeah, you actually might want to listen to what they're saying. So yeah, I think that's kind of the my take on the economy overall and where we currently are.
Yeah, they made the Fed has made and these politicians have made economics unserious.
Yeah.
And it reminds me when you just said, when the Fed says, I think we're in a housing bubble after we've been saying it for a while, and it's pretty obvious. Reminds me of a scene from the movie Die Hard where it's a cop played by this guy who used to play on Family Matters.
Yeah, yeah,
He's talking to
Reginald
Bruce
Bell
Willis.
Johnson.
Yeah, he's got the situation under
Shouts out to
control.
Reggie if he watches the show.
Yeah, he hasn't, nobody has mentioned his name in a while. Nobody mentioned Big Guy's name in a while, as Urkel used to call him. But he's got the situation under control. He's talking to Bruce Willis. He's got the situation
Yeah.
under control. Then the FBI shows up, and then he tells the guys to go up, and the cop looks at him and says, "No, that's not a good idea." He sends them up anyway, and then they start shooting, and the FBI guys, "They're shooting us." He goes, "They're shooting at the lights." And the FBI guy calls in and goes, "They're shooting at the lights," like that,
Right.
like there's a housing bubble. If I go, I think we're in a housing bubble.
Right.
We've been saying for a while, this is going to lead to a housing bubble. Years later, every day in perpetuity. Years later, I think we're in a housing bubble.
Right.
They're shooting at the lights. Yeah, but anyway,
Yeah.
that's sort of that. But the Fed has sort of made this unserious, and the public's just not aware of it, and the rent's not going down. And in New York,
At all.
like when I was coming out of college in the late '80s, I used to live in D.C. area, and there was a real estate debacle. Started in New England, it reverberated down through the Mid-Atlantic states, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. Um, it hit Florida and Texas and California very hard, and
Mm.
they'd overbuilt in D.C. area. There were too many malls, and you had to just take the downside. They
Right.
overbuilt. They overbuilt now, and now the mayor of New York wants people to return back to work to help the real estate developers who overbuilt. So they keep trying to prop it up.
Right.
That's why you don't overbuild. So he's
Exactly.
trying. He and the governor are trying to convince these corporations to push their employees to return back to work to help the real estate developers who own all the office space. And
Yep.
if the office space goes down, it's going to hurt New York. It hurt DC.
Yep.
I mean, how long are you going to prop this up? Well, we make it hurt. Did you think about that when they were overbuilding?
Right.
You
Exactly.
just rent can't rise in perpetuity. I don't think, but that's how they think that's good for the economy, helping a very small segment of society who control the politicians and have them in their back pocket. So we're going to segue to no regime change in Russia, and I think there's been like a point of contention. I mean, no matter what the question is, the answer seems to be regime change. We went into Iraq during the Bush administration, and no evidence. They couldn't find Super Soaker over there
To this day.
under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. Saddam was on the run. They found him in a hole, he had dug a hole for
Literally.
himself.
Yeah.
Right, he was living there for a while, and he comes out hair not combed, hadn't taken a bath probably in weeks, and they pulled this guy out of there and embarrassed the guy in front of his own country, and they had a public hanging of Saddam. They
Yeah.
kicked during the Obama administration. They were kicking they were kicking Muammar
Gaddafi.
Gaddafi's head down the street like a football, and they
Yep.
videotaped it.
Yep.
So you got Kim Jong Un says it's not going to happen to me in North Korea. And Putin said, I heard Putin has looked at that video of Gaddafi several times, over and over and over again. He says, it's not going to happen to me. It's not happening. But the U.S. keeps
Mm,
talking about, I think, talking about getting tough with Putin because of war crimes. But they get counted that we had war crimes over the years in Iraq and around the country where we've been dropping drones on civilians. And excuse me, around the globe where we've been dropping drones on civilians. Some of which we know about, some of which we probably don't know about. I'm not sure the country really wants to know. But Biden also mentioned that Putin must go. I'm not sure if he was coherent at the time when he said it, but it's unbecoming of a world leader to say something like that. I know Lindsey Graham has mentioned something about Putin must go. We got to take him out. And we also saw a video of this guy down at a city council meeting in Austin, in Texas, rapping about
mm.
Putin must go. But I
Right,
think it's
right,
unbecoming.
right.
I think it's unbecoming of a world leader to suggest that Putin needs to be removed, and that could be taken several different ways. I think he tried to walk that back. Then also, Joanne Reeves, I'm going to show you a clip of interview Kamala Harris where she asked Kamala that same question about does she also believe that Putin must go? So I'm going to try to share my screen right quick. All right.
Mm.
Community that really in many ways is no different than what we're familiar with here in the
That's
US.
right. That's
The
right.
Ukraine crisis is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe we're all watching happen in real time, where people with real needs and normal lives have
Right.
been completely disrupted. Some 4 million Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes
Yeah.
because of what Russia has decided to do. Both yourself and the president were in the region recently.
Yeah.
And when the president was there, he gave a speech in Warsaw. It was well received by many, but he also said something that I think was received well by some, but kind of surprised others. He said that Vladimir Putin should no longer be the leader of Russia. Do you agree?
Listen, I think that you framed the point quite accurately and well, which is America's policy has been and will continue to be focused on the real issue at hand, which is one, the needs of the Ukrainian people, which we will continue to support through humanitarian assistance, through security assistance, but also ensuring that there's going to be serious consequence for Vladimir Putin and Russian aggression as it relates to Ukraine, which is why our policy from the beginning has been about ensuring that there are going to be real costs exacted against Russia in the form of severe sanctions, which we know are having a real impact and an immediate impact, not to mention the longer term impact, which is about saying there's going to be consequence and accountability when you commit the kinds of atrocities that he is committing. And I think the president has been an extraordinary leader. To your point, Joy, I've been to Poland. I was in Romania. I've been to Europe, I think, probably at least 3 times in the last 4 months. I was in Munich, Germany, where I gave a speech at the Munich Security Conference. I was in France before that, speaking with heads of state about this issue, among many other issues, but most recently about this issue. And I will tell you, in sitting down with prime ministers and presidents, often the first thing they would say to me is thank you to the United States and this administration.
Okay. So that's Kamala's response, and she was talking in circles a little bit, but I think she kind of walked back Biden's comments somewhat. She didn't really address it directly, but she was kind of talking in circles a little bit, where she's kind of mastered the art of giving non-answers to questions. But so I'm just gonna get your take on Biden's comments about regime change and Kamala's response to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Biden has been very clear. That's one of the things that we can say, that even in what's now turned into kind of these humorous, especially on the campaign trail, these humorous ramblings of Biden, and nonsensical and irrational, just mumblings and like garbled sentences that he used to say, right? We've seen less of those. So he does like two things really well, in other words. And, so he does these kind of mumblings and that you're just like, what? Where it's unclear. But what he does say, he actually says with some conviction, in other words. I think that's his shtick, right? That he wants to say and be convincing,
Right.
and stand by what he says, right? So,
Yeah.
when he addressed, uh, he addressed the CBC on that Zoom call and told what he not going to do.
Right. Y'all gonna get a caning if you keep this nonsense up.
Exactly.
You gonna get caned. Yeah.
He was pretty clear. So he doesn't often mince the words when he does speak, right?
Okay.
And that's ultimately my point. And to use your favorite term, when Kamala came in, it just got squirrely. Why? Because that 'cause she started backpedaling, saying, "Oh, we that there are going to be consequences, but in the means of severe sanctions,
Mm.
not
Right.
any physical
Right.
consequences," because she didn't want to be seen as a direct attack, like a direct threat to Putin, or what could be construed as a direct physical threat to Russia, Putin, and Russia. Very one of the things that often doesn't get talked about is how often do sanctions impact the leadership versus how often do sanctions impact the people. And this is if you listen to, I think, our takes on the economy, and that's really what we are setting out to do, is to make the distinctions between what's happening at the top, the 1%, the 5% of the population, the investor class, versus what is happening to the rest of the 95% and the 99% of the population. Because those are two very different outcomes. And so when you talk about putting sanctions on Russia, even putting sanctions in Iraq, putting sanctions in Libya, they're framed as, well, these are sanctions targeting the leadership. But in practicality, it does not impact the leadership. The
Right.
leadership controls the legislation, the leadership controls the monetary policy, the judicial policies. So you can't implement sanctions that solely choke the leadership without choking the people. And these sanctions have largely impacted the people. There are rumors that Putin is the wealthiest man on the planet. Even Elon Musk came out, I think, in the last week or so, pretty recently, and stated that he believes Putin is richer than him by and large. Like he thinks Putin is at least twice as rich as he
Right.
is.
Yeah.
So that's
He's
a
got
pretty
more
bold
land. He's
statement.
got more land in Ukraine now, right? Putin
Exactly. So,
got a few
uh,
beaches.
yeah, just this backpedaling. So I get it. It's diplomacy. And it's pretty interesting how we're talking about supporting humanitarian efforts. Meanwhile, there hasn't been an addressing of the fact that you're looking at Nazi regimes that are in uniform, that are waving the Ukrainian flag, that are the frontline fighters, this Azov battalion. This These are open Nazis,
Hmm.
like practicing Nazis, and yet there is no addressing of that by Biden, by Kamala Harris. So when you're saying, "Oh, we're providing not only humanitarian efforts but security assistance," what security assistance? Like security assistance isn't just consultations. Certainly not consultations by phone. This is boots on the ground. This is weapons on the ground. This is funding on the ground. And you're openly funding, supporting, and arming the very same people that you claimed, and continue to pat yourself on the back to say, well, this is why we joined World War II, was to stop the Nazis.
Right,
Like it
right,
had
right,
nothing to do with resources. It had nothing to do with seeing this as an opportunity to expand U.S. manufacturing capabilities. It had nothing to do with that. Of course, it was all the altruism of of the American government, of FDR. So we know that we know that those are the facts.
right.
Uh, and
That goes without saying. Doesn't need to be said, though.
right, it goes
You're being
without
you're
saying.
being redundant. You're being redundant here. Yeah.
How is it that we are now, um, you know, 80 years later saying that, well, we can now support Nazis because
Right,
Putin is invading, so we got to pick the lesser of two evils, and
right.
we got like what wasn't? Didn't we hear that in the late '80s? CIA, Taliban, like that. Nah,
Right,
none of that.
right.
Like that. That just
You need like near linear programming model to figure out who we're mad at now. You know what I mean? We're mad at somebody.
right.
Noriega, Saddam, Iraq, Iran.
Exactly. Like what Osama just came out of nowhere, huh? He
Right,
just popped up. Uh, we're not repeating even recent history.
right,
So
right. That's a good point. That's
it's
an excellent point. That's an excellent point because you could be weaponizing another group. You
that
could be weaponizing. You could be weaponizing another group the way same in the way that we weaponized Saddam Hussein. Taught him how to, gave him weapons, taught him our methods, and now next thing you know, he's our enemy, and
I mean
he knows how to fight with U.S. tactics.
and it's pretty interesting because even prior, yeah, within the last 2 or 3 weeks, announced that over 100,000 Ukrainians will be coming through refugee and asylum programs, etc. Well, how do we know that? What percentage of those 100,000 were not practicing Nazis in the Ukrainian armed forces? And
Right,
that they're going to bring their skill set into law enforcement, into the U.S. military,
right,
into the alphabet agencies of policing that black folks already are having current issues with.
right. It was like Scarface, right? We bring these people, so-called political prisoners, and they turn into they come over here into the drug trade, and they bring their skill set to into the drug trade, and create havoc in Miami. But those are all excellent points. I mean, I think the point about the other thing is that when we there's gonna be some consequences either way. I mean, in the black community, it's a concept that to get ass, you gotta bring ass, and excuse my language, but we put sanctions on Russia. They put sanctions on us. Maybe they don't. They in China or their allies don't want to trade with the United States, and they're holding back certain supplies that we need for our supply chain, whether it's computer chips or foodstuffs or what have you. And then when the pullback in global trade, again, we talked about this before, it's going to
Mhm.
lead to a recession overall. So, I mean, if we send Russia to the bread lines and we go to the bread lines, who wins? Did anybody really win? And so
Right.
the other thing is that you have the people in the media constantly talking about regime change. We need to go over to the Ukraine and show Russia and show Putin what we can do, but we really don't have to go all the way to the Ukraine because geographically we're closer to Russia than we are to the Ukraine, given the fact that if you look at Alaska. So I'm gonna show a map of when we look at most of the maps, we look at a map flat. It's like Russia's way over here. When you look at a globe, we're actually closer to Russia than we actually realize. I think than the public realize. So I'm gonna share my screen right quick.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a map of the Bering Strait, and this is a
Mm.
map of Alaska and Russia. And this strait, I mean, between the closest parts of these islands, one is called I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, Chukchi Islands, and the other one which is in the Chukchi Peninsula, which is in Russia, and the Seward Peninsula, which is in Alaska. They're only separated by about 35 miles. So we're
Mm.
actually very close. We're actually very close to Russia, and according to my little research here, the Bering Strait is and it's a little strait here. Waterway is a strait between the Pacific and Arctic Ocean, separating, the Chukchi Peninsula and of the Russian Far East from the Seward Peninsula in Alaska. So we're only about 35 miles from Russia, if you think about it,
Yeah.
and that's why we won't. I find it highly unlikely that we would actually engage Russia. And if we wanted to engage Russia, we don't have to go to the Ukraine. We don't have to go to Central Europe. We can go right to Alaska. And I'm not sure the American people realized that there was really a skirmish with was any sort of dust up with Russia. I think you see um, ships in Russia on the Bering out here in the Bering Strait, and also in outside of Alaska. I think there's a neutral zone, but I think you would see ships or planes or some military exercises out here in this area, and I'm not sure the stock market would react kindly to that. And from my understanding, and early as 2020, as recently as 2021, July 2021, there was some type of a dust up where it says here, looking at a report from Time Magazine, I think it says Russia's defense ministry has said it scrambled fighter jets to escort U.S. bombers over the Bering Sea and the country's far east as tensions between Moscow and Washington continue to ramp up. So there were tensions back as far back as early as July of last year.
Right.
So
I
while we're
remember
talking
that
about the
too.
Ukraine, while we're talking about the Ukraine, it probably had already started with this. It probably had all this is probably already metastasized to the Bering Strait as far back as early as July of last year. And it says here
Right.
that Moscow said on Thursday that it sent MiG 31 and Su 35 fighters to accompany the U.S. Air Force's B 52 strategic bombers out of the neutral zone. And so there was already a dust up already in this region, and that's probably due to maybe Russia having exercises outside of Ukraine or coming near the Ukraine. So if we really want, again, we want to engage Russia, we wouldn't have to go to the Ukraine. We could go right to Alaska and to the Bering Strait, and I'm not sure the public is really aware of that.
Well, I think I think we'll be remiss to not take this opportunity to bring up the famous line by Sarah Palin, how she can look at Putin outside of her backyard window or her kitchen windows like that, and I remember how she got laughed off. Because outside of her kookiness, she got laughed off when she said that. But I kind of got what she meant. Obviously is a hyperbole that she can see Putin, but can you see Russia? Absolutely, you can see Russia from certain areas of Alaska. I didn't Google map her specific home, so I don't know how close to the Alaska border she lives. But it is not an unfathomable statement to say that, yeah, I can see, if I'm standing in Alaska, can I see Russia? Just the same as if I'm standing in Michigan, can I see Canada? 100%. Right? And it's no different. Another, I think if we even recall some of our history, I know I didn't learn it until um, uh, took anthropology as an elective in undergrad, but how the original indigenous Americans, which I think which would ultimately end up being the original indigenous Americans, walked to America from what would be now deemed as like Mongolia, the Mongolian area. I think genetically, if we look back about 12 or 13,000 years ago, the genetics of Native Americans are kind of Western Asian admixture, and kind of asking that question, well, how does that admixture end up in America, thousands of miles away? And they figured out, well, the Bering Strait was actually a frozen tundra, so they walked. They walked in over generations, da da da. So I think for me, that's when I think kind of realized like how close the U.S. is to Russia. In other
So
words,
you're
and
making it. You
just Europe and or Euro Asia is what it used to be called,
Yeah,
right?
you're making the situation worse, Torian. You're scaring me now. It implies that we could actually walk to Russia. That's really scary. We don't need to swim. We can walk. Okay. Wow.
Right. But yeah, I think it does speak to the geographical strategy. In other words, if the U.S. really wanted to go to war with Russia, we wouldn't have remained in the Cold War for as long as we did, right? Like, would have just went there, right? If you really wanted to go to war with this country, then you would have just put boots on the ground, and that would have been that. Met somewhere up in Greenland or Newfoundland and battled it out. And for those reasons, because of geographical proximity, this is, I think, in my opinion, the biggest reason why the U.S. has never presented a military front to Russia. Why it's always been this underlying tension, because equally Russia realizes the same thing, right? That the U.S. could put boots on the ground just as easily as Russia can put boots on the ground. And after World War II, it has been a contentious kind of, I don't know, I guess you could call it a situationship, is what folks say
Oh,
today.
not
Right?
not an entanglement. No, not
An
that. Don't
entanglement.
start. Don't start. Don't start. Wow. Wow.
So Russia and the U.S. is in an entanglement. That's
Not the red table talk here.
exactly. So now the question is, who is U.S.? Is it Will or is it August?
Yeah.
I'll see
We'll
that.
be. I'm gonna grimace at that joke until August.
Exactly. I'll let the
Don't
audience
slap.
debate that one out, right?
Yeah. Don't
Who's
slap me. Don't slap me.
so yeah, that's really what U.S. Russia relations have been in over the last really 90 years at this point. It has been a contentious situationship, an entanglement.
Right.
Love, hate to love to hate. It's like,
Right,
but
and I think
yeah,
Alaska and Canada both have a very strong interest in keeping that entanglement from becoming unentangled.
exactly, exactly. So, I think that is the natural reality of it. I think that's why Kamala also was being very careful, was walking on eggshells, began to walk back a statement that Biden made, which we already saw. What's homegirl's name? Simone.
Sanders, not Simone Sanders.
Simone Sanders. That's right. Thank you. Simone Sanders, when she was playing offensive lineman for the Biden campaign, on his clear racist statements, and she was blocking any and everybody that had anything to say about Biden's clear, blunt, and racist statements that were said with conviction, without any mincing of words. So, in other words, we've seen already what the cleanup act for Biden has been. We've seen the cleanup since he has run for office, in other words. So this is just going to be another statement that Biden is going to evade attribution. Biden wasn't, feeling well that day. He had a little tummy ache. He didn't understand the question. You're overlooking the context. You're taking them out of context. The million and one reasons that we continue to hear Biden make these statements that are outlandish, but that are straightforward, and as opposed to just simply not only holding him to an account, but just saying, well, this is exactly what you said, full stop. Like, we don't have to, Biden does not use words that need an interpreter.
Right. We know the words he was using.
Fourth grade education. We don't need interpreters for what Biden is talking about.
Yeah, we know he was. He didn't need an interpreter back in the 80s and 90s when he was talking about, locking up, black folks for selling drugs or whatever.
That's exactly
It's very clear. It's very clear. But it just seems kind of silly that when these people in the media talk about getting tough with Putin, that's sort of my overarching theme is that we need to go over there and show Putin this, and we need to go over there and have boots on the ground. We need to go over there and do this to Russia. We don't have to go to Central Europe to engage Russia.
You're right. At all.
And Russia's a lot closer. Right. They're a lot closer than I think people realize. And I'm sure somebody will be showing this map in the corporate media next couple of days, or maybe even in the Biden administration, talking about this map, the Bering Strait. Well, and the part about walking to Russia, I'm not sure they'll mention that, hopefully. So it just shows you how close in proximity we are with the United States, with Russia, and how silly it is to even contemplate engaging Russia. I know they're talking about trying to keep Russia from encroaching further into Central Europe. But we'll see how that goes. But at the end of the day, I think Putin is upset about. A lot of people may feel a certain way about the Soviet Union breakup under Gorbachev, and they feel like Poland and Czech Republic and Hungary belong to them. So that's kind of like how they see it, and it's going to be something that's going to continue to flare up over the next, at least while Putin is in office. And if you try to get rid of Putin, who knows? It could be somebody who even more aggressive or more of a strong man than he was. I think Putin as a choice when Yeltsin left was more of a it was like a almost like a catch-22 in that they needed him to help stabilize the economy, but they also knew he had he wasn't necessarily a happy camper about the breakup of the Soviet Union. Like a lot of people in the military probably were not.
Right, and two, one of the things that is, I think on one hand you have to take it with a grain of salt, but on the other hand you also have to take it seriously, because if we can believe what we're seeing coming out of Russia, there were images, video clips of Putin essentially touring Russia, talking about the objectives of Russia and their essentially obligation to annex the Ukraine, to bring them under the Russian banner, and it seemed to be a popular message amongst the Russian people. You saw thousands of people being filled out in these stadiums and everywhere Putin was speaking. But we don't, from the outside looking in, we don't know if we're looking at another Trump type of support, in the sense that if you had only listened to Trump, you would have thought that Trump probably got the greatest support of any president preceding him, right?
Right.
And he even stated that, oh, no, I got more people out on the lawn welcoming me than any other president. So much so that CNN didn't hesitate to show the aerial topography of of the side by side of Obama's inauguration
Right.
versus Trump's inauguration. So you just don't know. In other words, is can I believe my eyes, right? Can I really believe? And on one hand, if what we're seeing is a Trump-like illusion, then maybe there's less to worry about. But on the other hand, if it truly is genuine and authentic support, that this is something that the Russian people actually care about. I think one of the things that stands as a stark difference between the American population and the Russian population is that we have, other than 9/11, I think that that's the only time that I can remember, and I don't know, maybe you can speak to what the support was like for Vietnam, but
I'm not quite that old, but anyway, maybe I wasn't in Vietnam, Tori. And that's the end of Red Table Talk, y'all. Thank you for joining us.
but but I don't recall any just standing ovations of the American population saying, yes, we should go to war with these people.
Right.
Maybe World War II, I think, was maybe the last time that there was this collective patriotism that rippled through the country, where anywhere the president went, there was a collective affirming that, yes, we should send the men off to war, and we'll support and keep the homestead functioning while we
Yeah,
go off to war.
but we had been attacked though. That's a little different. We had been attacked in
No,
World War II,
that's
so
very
that's a little
that's
different.
very true. So,
I was
but my
I was
point
there. I was in
is that,
I was in Pearl Harbor when that happened.
yeah, there you go. But my point is just that that you just don't see that type of support for entering into war um, from the American population
Right.
versus the Russian population. And so I think that kind of speaks to the character of the differences between each population. That if this is something that the Russian population truly believes in, that yes, this is our duty, this is our obligation, we owe it to ourselves to bring the Ukrainian people back into the fold by any means necessary, and that this is destiny almost, and that's kind of the sense that I got from the media clips and going around, etc. That this is a part of Russian destiny, and maybe that is real, right? I don't know, and that's overall my point. Is that we don't know, right? That
But but the
because
main thing is to
that
keep the
is
main thing.
and that's very different than, like, how do you sanction that, right?
Well,
Like, how do you?
the main job of a leader in Russia or U.S. or wherever is to keep their citizens safe.
Right,
That's his first job.
right,
I'm not saying it's his only job. That's his first job. You can't
first
get
job,
that
yep.
wrong. And Putin doesn't want anybody on Russia's border. Like
I
we
mean,
wouldn't
that
want anybody. We
even in
wouldn't
our
want
own
anybody.
oath, right? And
Right.
any oath that you have to take, the very first line is to defend
Right.
the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic.
Right. Right.
So 100%.
Like Jack Nicholson. Like Jack Nicholson. You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall.
Yep,
They got Putin as
exactly.
president for a reason. Other thing is that if you have somebody come by your house, you have a plumber come by your house. If he just take his toolbox out, you're getting charged.
Right.
You're not going to take his toolbox out and go home and not charge you. You're getting charged $200 if he take his toolbox out.
Yep.
So you had to make Putin come into Russia, into the Ukraine. He had been signaling for years that about the Ukraine in the UN, signaling for years that this is against what we previously agreed upon. If you had to make him come into the Ukraine, he's not going to take half of it and leave.
Right.
He's not going to take a third of it and leave. He's taking all of it.
Right.
Don't make him come out there. Don't make him come into your country.
No,
If you don't want
absolutely
to get charged, don't tell that plumber to come there. He
right.
takes his toolbox out, you're getting charged. Period.
And then to the other side of it, the reality is that if we're just not in the position. We just are not in the position economically. We're not in the position financially as a country. Um, we're just not in the position to go to war with Russia, maintain the same overseas interventions that we currently maintain as a nation, and continue to go into an economic war with China.
Right. This
A
could
lot
be
of
interesting.
ways, in a lot of ways, this would certainly be a bait.
Right.
You
This would
know,
be interesting. It'd be
pulling
interesting. It'd be interesting juxtaposition because Russia wasn't as strong when we were having the arms war under Reagan, and we
exactly.
broke the Russian economy.
Yep.
We broke the Russian economy. They could. I mean, we get into an economic war with Russia and its sphere of influence, China and its sphere of influence. They could break the U.S. We've already talked about the housing bubble.
That's literally it. So that's my whole point, that our economy is too precarious. Um, there's not enough one percenters to keep the entire economy afloat without the participation of the non one percenters.
Right.
We unless the 99% can kick their feet up, collect a check, continue to obtain assets, and then those assets continue to inflate in value while the 1% does the work of keeping the economy afloat in order to pump up the assets of the 99%. It's not going to work.
The one
Unless the
percent.
1% is ready for that job, then it's not going to work.
The
The one
1% is not patriotic. They're beholden to themselves.
exactly. So unless they're going to unless they're going to be the ones to go to war, put the uniform, don the uniforms on, pick up arms, go to
Right.
war, also keep the economy afloat, keep the the judiciary going, the legislative body going, the executive body going, keep jobs opening up, keep opportunities opening up, cap off rent, cap off mortgages, lower inflation. Like, listen, uh, it's just not. It's unrealistic. Like,
Right.
there's just no
Right.
way that that's going to happen. Because if we enter into war with Russia, we will see bread lines. We're
Right.
already homelessness is at its peak. I don't think that the American population largely realizes that, because ever since Occupy Wall Street has been stamped out, as that put a huge spotlight on the problem of homelessness, due to the financial crisis, due to the amount of people that actually lost their homes, and exacerbated an existing homeless crisis that predated Occupy Wall Street. And being that it's stamped out, we've largely kind of put homelessness on a back burner. New York, LA, Portland, these cities have been kind of the poster children for homelessness, but rarely do we talk about middle America. Rarely do we talk about these cities that don't get the media attention. Flint is still dealing with a water crisis to this day,
Right.
right now.
Right. And
Obama,
we're still people giving people we're setting up drug injection sites.
exactly. We're talking about an opioid crisis. We're talking about birth rates for the first time in history being lower, and specifically within the white population. Let's be clear that there are less white people being born than there are those that are dying. They're higher.
Right.
So, in other words, this already exists right now.
Yeah.
You want to go to war with Russia, put boots on the ground with Russia, I guarantee that all of those areas that we just talked about are going to exacerbate times 10.
Or even like a trade war, even a trade war or economic war. I mean,
Exactly.
people obviously. What you're talking about, people aren't buying homes. People aren't. They don't want to overpay for homes, and they don't want to. They're not having children means they're not optimistic about the future.
Exactly.
And we're not in a position again. And Putin knows this as much as probably as well as anybody else. So I think it's if we get into an economic war, we're done.
Oh, we're absolutely done.
The Fed can't print enough money. The Fed can't print enough money.
Because now we end up like Zimbabwe, we end up like World War II Germany of hyperinflation. There's only so much inflation that can happen, but what are we currently doing? The Fed is already on rate hike number 2, with 4 more proposed rate hikes happening by July.
Right.
So, and we may need a 7th rate hike before the end of the year. So,
And people predicting that we're gonna have to cut rates in 2023 to start QE all over again.
right.
That's where we're
So
going, because there's gonna be a recession. Period.
we are not in a position, like, listen, kudos to all the patriotic folks out there, all the, American exceptionalism, the hoorah folks out there that, that we can do.
Right.
We're the greatest country on the face of the planet. Okay. The greatest country on the face of the planet are dealing with all of these issues that we just named. These are facts. These are not opinion. This is not stats being skewed and manipulated. This is the rest of the 95% of the population that is struggling to make ends meet, that has mounting debt. In fact, one of the things that was just in a conversation just yesterday, that if you look at the youngest Gen X generation and the oldest millennials, so those folks kind of born like 1979 to 1989, that 10-year period, that those are actually the worst off folks, because this is the first time that you have a generation that makes less money, that has less wealth than their parents, and they actually make less income than their children. Imagine that, like, that you have that. And this is the generation that when we talk about the middle class, when we talk about the levels, the stratification of the middle class, the working poor, the working homeless, this is that generation.
But if let's
late 40s. This
let's
is
say you're not in the 1%, right? You don't own your own business. You don't work in you don't have a tech company. You don't work for a tech company. But you're making money is more, I guess, the gig economy, right? And you're in your 40s and 50s. You're probably too old to be a part of the gig economy. And the guys who in their 20s and early 20s will soon be too old to be in the gig economy, because you just can't keep working that many hours You follow what I'm saying? You can
Yeah.
do it for a few years, but you can't do it for so long to make the math work. There are not
That's
enough
it.
DoorDash deliveries or Uber driving, whatever. And if the economy turns down, that's going to turn down too. You follow?
Exactly,
So,
because this is
I
the
mean,
generation that is straddled with the most student loan debt in the history
right,
of the
right.
country. These are
We've
the
been
folks that
we've been talking about it.
exactly.
We've
These
been
are the
talking about it.
folks for years.
Right,
This
right,
is what our soapbox has been about,
right,
is that this is that section and that sector of individuals that actually make up the bulk of those that have inherited the previous generation's debt, still straddling and kind of working through that debt, but also manage to still try to have families, to
right,
still go
right,
to school, take the same path that made their parents successful, but also forge a new path. Because this is a generation that it was Generation X that populated the internet, that made
right,
it
right,
popular. This is Generation X that brought in the same systems that we today call innovative. These are
right,
the
right, right.
dot-com bubble folks, in other
Mm-hmm.
words. So you had to forge a new path, in other words, and even in spite of the new technologies and the advancements that now Gen Z has been able to pick up, what the youngest, what is it? The Ryan kid, 8 years old, first year on YouTube, made $22
Mm-hmm.
million. I think he's on
Right.
pace to be a billionaire by the time he's 14. Well, those opportunities for that same generation didn't exist when they were eight. When we were eight,
Yeah.
it wasn't there.
OnlyFans,
Yeah,
and
there wasn't an OnlyFans.
Instagram models were
It,
making making a pretty good
exactly.
living. You
So,
know,
in other words, it's just a recognition that this is the generation that we are talking about. This is the bulk of that difference between the 1% and abject poverty, is that
right,
generation. So, it is emphatic that we must stay out of a physical war, because we will be looking at bread lines. We will be looking at, China playing commercials of, American kids with flies on their eyes and overdeveloped bellies with skinny arms, saying that they can sponsor an American child for 30 cents a day.
yeah.
It's
I mean,
like,
they're probably making commercials of us in drug injection sites.
there you
You know what I'm
go.
saying? And so we've been saying this for a while, and we've been getting dismissed because you got these people in the media talking about taking down flags. We need to take down the flag, and Charlottesville this,
Right.
and Trump's a racist, and it's a bunch of nonsense, And now we're here. What we've been saying for a while, and now we're here.
That,
We
that's
have
what
the
it
Fed
is.
repeating, right. And so anyway, I guess I guess people continue to co-opt our message, but we've been saying it for a while, and apparently nobody's really I don't say nobody's been listening, but people trying to tune us out. And the Obama administration in particular kept saying that these doom and gloomers and the media kept calling us saying fringe groups, but now we're here. But anyway, so that's our red table talk. I mean, excuse me. That's
I want
don't
my
don't
red too.
don't don't slap me. But anyway, so that's Trump and the GE. No regime change in Russia. Thanks for tuning in, and we see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Yeah.